Hi again, this is Miss Nuria, and today we're going to continue talking about Mrs. Katz and Tush. Can you remember a little bit of the story? So we didn't have a lot of time to talk about our story last time because it was quite a long story, but I really hope that you enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite that we've done so far. I really like the way the friendship between Lornell and Mrs. Katz happens and how they start to get along and how they learn so much from each other. And yeah, so I hope that you have enjoyed it as much as I did. And we're going to continue with the lesson now. Can you remember a little bit of the story? It's about Mrs. Katz who makes friends with a little boy called Lornell. And together they have a cat and they take care of it while they get to know each other and while they develop a lot of love for each other. As I had said before, these lessons are going to be about how do we identify the main parts of a story so that then we can retell them. Yes? So today we're going to do the things a little bit different. Yes? So instead of sending homework at the end, I'm going to explain it to you now so that then you can follow along with me today, okay? So this is a story map. Let's look at the story map. At the corner we can see that it says characters. Right in the middle there's a circle that says title and author. Then it says setting. Then we have problem and solution. And at the end we've got plot. Yes? So let's go through these elements. In the middle we have the circle that says title and author. That is very, very easy. You just have to write the name of the story, which is Mrs. Katz and Tush, and the author, that is Patricia Polacco. Next, you'll see at the top corners that it says characters and setting. The next video is going to be about characters and setting. But for now, just think, who are the people in my story? And where does my story take place? Does it take place in just one place or do they go around? And if it takes place in just one place, is it a big city? Is it a small town? Yeah, what do you think? We'll talk about it next week. Now, next we're going to talk about the important points about today, which are problem, resolution, and plot. Now, before we continue with this, I just want to talk a little bit about our story. In the videos that we saw before, we talked about genre. Now, which genre would you say this story is? Because it's not an adventure, yeah? The characters don't go from a point to another and they don't have to go through obstacles, yes? And it's not a comedy, although it has quite a happy message, yeah? It's definitely not a horror, and it's also not a romance. Because this story is more based on our characters, the people we meet through the story, yes? Although there is a storyline, there are moments in the story that we can identify, and that's what we're going to call the plot, yes? There are little problems and little solutions, and we're going to be talking about them now, yeah? And there might be a main plot. There might be a main thing that leads our character. So we're going to be talking about that. So let's review our story. Our story starts when Lornell meets Mrs. Katz. Mrs. Katz looks at her album of photographs and she gets very sad. She begins to cry and she talks about how she doesn't have any family. Mrs. Katz is very lonely. Yes? Then, Lornell sees this, and how do you think Lornell feels? We don't talk about it. They don't talk about it in the book. They don't point it out. But the very next day, Lornell brings a cat for Mrs. Katz. So Larnell must feel something about it, yes? Mrs. Katz accepts the cat, but she's quite worried because how is she gonna take care of a cat all by herself? So she needs help. Who gives her some help? It is Larnell again, who promises he's gonna come visit her every day to take care of Tush, the cat. Tush and Mrs. Katz start to get along, but also Larnell and Mrs. Katz start to become really good friends, and they begin to have a lot of love for each other. Yes? So how do you think Mrs. Katz is feeling at this point? Do you think that she is still sad or not so much anymore? They exchange stories, she talks about her life, and she shares very intimate things that are very personal. To the point that she takes Larnell to basically introduce Larnell to her husband, yes? And so he takes him to the cemetery, yeah? And they talk to him, they put a little rock on top of his grave and to remember him, and then they keep going their way. The big problem here, one of the moments where we have the most tension and when we get more excited, well, not excited because excited is happy, but more invested, more we want to know what happened, is when they come home and Tush is gone. Yes? How do you think they feel? Because Tush is what has brought Larnell and Mrs. Katz together. It's their pet and their baby, and he is gone. How did you feel at that point? Did you think that they were going to find him? Larnell and Mrs. Katz look for her cat everywhere, and they cannot find her until Larnell's dad and some neighbors find Tush. Yeah, and when she comes back and she's a little bit different. She's getting fatter, she doesn't want to play, she wants to sleep, and surprise, surprise, she has some babies, yes? In the meantime, Mrs. Katz keeps explaining things about her life to Larnell. She talks about some festivals that are very important to her and to her people, and they find moments in which Larnell's family background and Mrs. Katz's family background are similar in a way. As I said, Tush eventually has babies, and Mrs. Katz is so excited because she's finally going to be a grandmother. She has 4 little kittens, and then we go forward and we see Larnell now is older, yeah? And he has a little baby of his own, and Mrs. Katz is older as well, and we can see little Tush over there being really fat and cute. In the end it says, and I want to reread this, as the years passed, Mrs. Katz, Tush, and her descendants became part of Larnell's family. So although Mrs. Katz didn't have a family of her own, she now shared one with Larnell. There were graduations. Graduation, you know what a graduation is, when you finish P6 or when you finish high school or university. Weddings, new babies, and finally a Kaddish. Remember what I said Kaddish was? Yeah, Kaddish is a funeral. And this is a bit sad because that means that in the end, Mrs. Katz passes away, she dies. But I want us to go all the way back to the beginning of her story. Larnell's mommy tells Larnell that Mrs. Katz gets very sad ever since her husband died and that she's very alone. And then Mrs. Katz shows the pictures and she cries and she says, "We had no children, I'll be all alone for Hanukkah and Passover." We explained what Passover was. Hanukkah is like Christmas for the people in the community of Mrs. Katz. So she said, "I'm going to be all alone for Christmas and Passover." It's like for us if we were all alone for Christmas and Chinese New Year. So what's really nice about it is that even though Mrs. Katz dies at the end, we know that through her life and for many years, she had a family and she had babies and she had Tush to be with her. So I went through the major plot points of our story, yes? The major plot points are like, think about the MTR, yes? So our story is like the MTR line, yeah? It keeps going forward, 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 forward. And the plot points are the MTR stations. So if our story was, for example, the red line of the MTR, you can't go from Central to Chinwan without stopping at TSD, Jordan, Yamate, Mongkok, Prince Edward, Shanshipo, etc., etc. Yes? That's how our plot points work. Because everything that happens in this book is a journey from Mrs. Katz feeling very sad and lonely, all the way to her having a life with a family that was Lernell and his family, yes? So you can't come from here to here if you don't have Lernell giving her a cat, Lernell helping her with the cat, Lernell and her bonding over their love for the cat, or having something very tense happen to them together when they lose Tush, or having some kittens together, yes? We need all these plot points, all these moments in which they become closer and closer and closer for them to end up being this close. And this journey, this MTR line, that's what we call plot, yes? The plot points are usually made by problem, solution, or another way to call it, conflict and resolution. So here's what I want you to do. Your homework for this week is to get the worksheet that I showed you and write who the characters in the story are. Where does our story take place? I'm going to give you a clue there, and I would just write for now in the city, yes? If you can identify another place, like Mrs. Katz's house, or a deli, or the cemetery, you can write that as well. But just for now, you can just write that the story happens in the city, yes? And then I want you to find our plot points, our problems and solutions, yes? There's not only one, there's several of them. Yeah, for example, Lernell's mommy says that Mrs. Katz is feeling lonely. That's a problem. What's the solution? Lernell finds her a cat. Next one. Mrs. Katz has a cat now, but she doesn't know how to take care of it, or she needs help to take care of it. So what's the solution? Mrs. Katz asks Lernell for help. You can go back on the other video and you can look at our story and write all the problems or conflicts and the resolution. Conflict resolution. That's why we have an arrow, because the conflict always leads to a resolution. Lastly, where it says plot at the bottom, you're gonna write what our story is about. And on a following video, your teachers will talk about respect as a theme of the year, yeah? So that should give you a little clue. But do think, what is this story really about? I really want you to think about that. And I really hope you have enjoyed this story as much as I have. And I will see you next time when we will be talking about characters and settings. So bye-bye. See you next time.